Okay, hi everybody. So I'm here at home and I'm grading Major Paper 2 and I'm running across some common changes that everybody needs to kind of take a look at. Um, and I thought, it's going to take me a while. I've got about 15, 17 or so more papers left to go, so I'm only halfway through and I'm worried I'm not going to be able to get these back to you really early. So I wanted you to have an understanding of what sort of things needed to be corrected so far before we move into discussing what you need to do for the argumentative section. So that's why I made this video. First of all, what I've noticed so far about most of your background sections is that it's not nearly long enough. It should be the bulk of your background research. It's not just an introduction to your ideas. You actually have to, when I say the time period, you can't just say that there were things in the time period like economic concerns or that the country had just come out of a recession or something along those lines. You have to explain what those economic concerns were. You have to explain what the recession was and what caused it. I mean, you have to do some thorough research into the background of what it is that you're going to be discussing. So if you're focused on the time period and how the time period might have made some changes in politics, you kind of got to get into the nitty gritty. If you're talking about differences between two different kinds of politicians or two different, politicians itself, like say you wanted to look at Romney and Obama, and you have their biographies there, you kind of got to go into detail on where they came from, what their upbringing was like, so that we understand who they are as people and why they might use some of the rhetorical strategies that they use. Finally, if you're talking about differences between political parties like Democrats and Republicans, you have to talk a little bit about the history of the formation of those parties, specifically what beliefs they stand for and how they're separate. Um, Also, this is the place where I'm really checking your APA format. So that's one of the reasons why there needs to be outside research. It can't just be general knowledge, because this is where you're showing me that you understand how to do APA in-text reference and internal citations, which of course we will still talk about, but that's why it needs to be an expanded research section so that it gives us all the background material that we need to understand the rest of your paper. Okay, so in general, your rhetorical analysis parts. First, at the start of each section, when you first start writing about a slogan or a commercial or your speeches, you have to have a mini introduction. Some of you did this really well. I just read one on politics within political parties that was very well done with mini introductions of what is a slogan, what is the purpose of it, what makes a slogan effective and ineffective, and just general types of each. Like when you talk about the commercials, you could talk about the history behind the first political commercial, like that. Just a little mini introduction, 2 or 3 sentences tops, not a big deal, but just to kind of introduce us to the idea of the slogan, commercial, or speeches. Otherwise, it feels really jagged getting in there, if that makes sense. So make sure you have a little mini intro. Okay, now focusing on the slogans. First of all, the rhetorical analysis sections, the slogans, the commercials, and the speeches are not a place for argument or for critiquing. Instead, it's about analysis, like pulling it apart and thinking about what is the purpose of the slogan and then what kind of techniques are being used to achieve that purpose. So one thing you can do is you can pull individual words out and you can explain the connotative meanings and the inferences that we should get from the slogan. So for example, let's take a look at this 1936 slogan, Life, Liberty, and Landon. Landon was a political opponent who did not win the presidential election in 1936, but he had a pretty darn good slogan. So let's talk about it really quickly. I can talk about 3 things with this slogan alone. First, I can talk about the connotative definitions of the words life and liberty, what feelings the word life brings to us. For example, when I think of life, I think of green, I think of fresh, I think of new. It's about beginnings and all of that sort of thing. And it gives kind of this feeling of hope, life, as opposed to death, right? Liberty, I mean, that's a foundation of an American foundational concept. And the idea of freedom and personal freedom. You can disagree with almost everything a politician stands for, but there's one thing that we can always agree is that liberty and freedom in this country is an important concept. So, including the words liberty or freedom or something like that in a campaign slogan allows you to connect with people whose other political beliefs may not necessarily connect with you. And then this particular person's last name was Landon. So we have the use of those connotative words, life and liberty. We have the use of the alliteration, L, L, and L, the repetition of those that sound, which makes it catchy and sticks with you, life, liberty, and Landon. But then we also have this allusion to the comment from our Constitution, no, from our Declaration of Independence. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, putting your name in the place of pursuit of happiness actually makes you infer, as you're looking at the slogan, that Landon would bring you happiness. And so the illusion and the inference that's drawn from that illusion is really important as far as the slogan is concerned. So I believe that Landon, in this particular slogan, wanted to remind people of the root values of American culture, and he did that through the connotative diction, through his use of alliteration, and through his connection with his own allusion to the Declaration of Independence. That is a rhetorical analysis of a slogan. Okay, so you're going to have to get a little bit more in detail with those slogans, not just what the purpose is. And a lot of you have touched on what the purpose and what you think the politician is trying to say, but you haven't broken it apart. So that's one thing that you really need to do. It doesn't have to be that long, but still, you got to do it. Okay, moving on to the commercials. So again, there should be no argument or critique of the commercials. Instead, you are doing an analysis, pulling it apart. First, talk about the purpose, overall purpose of the commercial, and then break it up. You're using an image and film analysis for the commercial. So think back to Born into Brothels, think back into Optic, think back to some of the things that we discussed when we were looking at film, like what images are used, what music is used, what's the difference between A and B roll footage, when do they use color, black and white, or contrast, angle, composition, special techniques, and then you can also include words. A lot of you are just using words, but you've kind of forgotten that there's more to it. I gave you content frames from the worksheet that I sent you home, and I said, look for 2 commercials that kind of interest you. And there's a lot of things in that content frame that you should reference back to when you're doing a rhetorical analysis of the commercial. So let's take a look at a campaign commercial from Living Room Candidate from 2000. I'm just going to choose the first one that pops up, and there it is. Okay, so this first one is Republican George W. Bush against Vice President Al Gore. George W. Bush was the governor at the time, so he's not the incumbent. There was no incumbent president, although Al Gore was a vice president, so he kind of had a leg up. So Bush here is a little bit more of a challenger, and this is his first run for political power. So let's take a look at what happened in this commercial. So we're going to begin, and I'm going to stop it when I have something to tell you.
He's been hailed as the Republican Party's best hope to win the White House.
Okay, already I have some rhetorical analysis to share with you. First of all, I know I said go touch on the words last, but we're going to do sequential analysis. So let's start with the first quote. He has been hailed as the Republican Party's best hope for the White House was the comment that was made at the very beginning. And I think the use of the word hailed is extremely important in all political commentary, because hailed is an inference to, or can be seen as an inference to, the theme song essentially for presidents, which is Hail to the Chief. So whenever you say that someone is hailed as something in a political ad, there's this hidden kind of message that this person is presidential in nature. We also begin, if you take a look at the very opening, we start with a image of a colored, like a colored image, using a color in the film, and then we move into...
He's been hailed as the Republican Party's best hope to win the White House.
Black and white. So this is if I recall correctly, this is going to be a trend that we're going to see in this commercial, that it's going to go from color to black and white, color to black and white. The other trend that you're going to see in this commercial is that there are these quotes that are pulled out from Fortune magazine or other people, and then there are certain words that the narrator said that are reinforced with the use of words across the screen, always in white. And you can see that those words are also moving. Um, they're not stationary. And I'll show you what I mean in a second.
As governor, he signed the 2 largest tax cuts in Texas history. He reduced the growth of state government spending to the lowest in 40 years.
Okay, so we go back and forth between color and black and white. And of course, that's a reference to past and present, right? So we see what he did in black and white. We see him being the governor in black and white. And then we see color images of him campaigning for president as like the future. So we've got a lot of that that's going on in this film. Okay, continuing on.
He improved public schools by restoring local control, raising standards, and returning to basics.
Now I can talk about the images of the kids here. A lot of, sorry, my son just woke up and he's down here too. So we have a lot of images of the kids' faces and bright hope for a future, which kind of combines with the colored images on the screen.
He cut welfare rolls in half.
We can talk about angle. If you took a look at this last picture with the kids and President Bush, we're kind of over his shoulder. We get to see what he's seeing, so we're kind of part of his team. But then in the next scene, we're part of the crowd watching him. So our perspective changes. And that kind of goes along with this idea of the we concept. He is one of us. We are one of him. We're part of his team, but we're also watching him.
Reduce junk lawsuits and cut juvenile crime 38%.
And then, of course, there's the
George
appeal
W.
to logos.
Bush, a compassionate conservative leader.
Where we have all the like data and things like that on the bottom. 30%. But we also have the pathos at the end, appeals to pathos. So here's his wife, and they say he's a compassionate conservative. And the words fresh start come across the screen. So that's all very important and really
fresh start for America,
to give this message that he has of past and present combining into one like concept for him being president of the United States. Okay, so now last thing is speeches. I have to say I was kind of disappointed in what I've read so far with the speeches, because it seems like a lot of you have forgotten everything that we discussed all quarter 1. Sequential analysis. So beginning with the purpose of the section, and then moving on to what kind of techniques did the speaker use to achieve that purpose. Once again, save your criticisms for the argument. This is no place for criticism. This is all about analysis. Anyway, hope that kind of helps. I'm going to send this off your way via Remind 101 and post it on YouTube so that you can access this and get at least an understanding of what I'm looking at so far in your papers. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.